All right, how's everybody doing today? Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. So it is Saturday, September 4th, 2021, and we're live. Hope everybody's doing well today. So I wanted to come on and talk for a few minutes about a new 10-week online course that I teach on Saturdays that deals with history from 1865, the last year of the Civil War, 1865 through 1968. Okay, and we teach this class on Saturdays, and normally it's we do the class Saturdays 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a 10-week online course. For today's class, we're going to start at 4 p.m. And we do the class live. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch them over and over again. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips, etc. I'm going to post a link here. You can register for the online course. You can join us in class today. And we also have archive sessions that you can go back and watch also. So I want to pull up the PowerPoint presentation here. This is a crucial period of history. All right. And I created this class because I teach a online course also that deals with history from ancient Africa through the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, through the Civil War, okay, through slavery and the Civil War, okay. And that class is Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Many of you have heard me talk about that class. We do with thousands of years of history and what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. And that class is 10 weeks. And I never had enough time to deal with the period from 1865 through 1968 the way I wanted to. This is a crucial period of history, okay? And it deals with what happened to us after slavery ended. What were the laws and policies put in place to put us in the predicament that we're in right now? So we understand where we need to go from here, understanding how politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Understanding how all this comes together to put us in the predicament we're in today, so we understand where we need to go from here. Okay, so this is what this 10-week online course does. So we deal with the last year of the Civil War, 1865, and we deal with what led up to the Civil War taking place as well, to give a recap of that history. Okay, everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in as well. Okay, so we know the U.S. Civil War is 1861 to 1865, and these are some of the actual slides from the course. Okay, I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have video clips, articles, book references, etc. And the Civil War in the United States began in 1861. Starts April 12, 1861, with the attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. After decades of simmering tensions between northern and southern states over slavery, states' rights, and westward expansion, the election of Abraham Lincoln in November 1860, when he became president-elect of the Republican Party, the Confederate States of America, Lincoln's election caused 7 southern states to secede from the Union to form the Confederate States of America. 4 more states are going to join them in 1861. South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union, December 20th, 1860. Now, the war between the states, as the Civil War was also known, ended in Confederate surrender in 1865. General Robert E. Lee surrenders April 9th, 1865. The conflict was the costliest and deadliest war ever fought on American soil, with some 620,000 of soldiers dying of the 2.4 million soldiers who served. 620,000 approximately going to die. We know it was about 186,000 to 200,000 African Americans that served in the Civil War as well. Millions more were injured, and much of the South was left in ruin. Okay, so the fights that we are dealing with today, the fights over the critical race theory, Okay, the fights over many of these southern states passing laws that have Republican dominated state legislatures passing laws, not just to suppress the African American vote and Latino vote and African and Asian American vote, things like this. We're dealing with a little more than 400 laws and 49 state legislatures being pushed. You have about 18, you about have about I think it's 18 states that have passed about 30 laws so far. That's a legacy of slavery. We deal with that in the class. Mississippi State Convention in 1890, Louisiana State Constitution 1898, Texas State Constitution 1876, targeting African Americans to suppress the vote. But also this whole lost cause myth that was pushed after the Civil War ended, that the South seceded from the Union to preserve states' rights, and they were against the federal government, and it wasn't about slavery and things like this. Okay, we see a fight taking place today that is a legacy of what happened after slavery ended, after Reconstruction ended in 1877. And you have Republican dominated state legislatures that are trying to suppress, especially the African American vote, and control more who can vote, suppress our vote to determine the trajectory of the future, okay, and determine who's in power to write laws and policies, etc. But then also they're trying to restrict what can be taught about the history of this country, what can be taught about the history of slavery as well. Whoever controls the teaching of the past will control the trajectory of the future. In these fights that we see taking place today, the January 6th insurrection, okay, the January 6th insurrection, I would argue, is a continuation of the Civil War. That's a continuation of the Civil War. That's a continuation of racial violence surrounding politics, surrounding political elections, like the Ocoee massacre of 1920 in Ocoee, Florida. Okay, all this is a continuation of this. So we really have to understand this history. A people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. So we have to understand this history in the past, what happened to us, the attacks that were happening, the methods that were used, to understand what's taking place today, so we better understand where we need to go from here. And all this deals with politics, laws and policies, etc. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. And we have to understand racism. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, which comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy. Racism has nothing to do with not liking people, calling people racial epithets. And when you hear, when we see the effort to take over local school boards, you have white Republicans. There's a whole effort to fund white Republicans taking over local school boards to suppress the teaching of history and what can be taught about history in these schools, to perpetuate the ignorance, And all this is surrounding the fear of the browning of America. All this is surrounding things like the census report that came out a few weeks ago that showed white people have a negative population growth in this country for the first time since 1790, when the first census was taken. Okay, all this is coming to a head. These demographic trends that we've been talking about for years, we're seeing all this come to a head right now. All right. Okay. So and on my show, the African History Network show, we've been talking about the census results, etc. There was a article from the Washington Post that also dealt with the census results, which is extremely important. White people had lost like about 5 million when it came to the population count. And let me see if we could find that here. Let me just pull that up to show it to you, because it tells you a lot about what's taking place right now. Okay. It has a lot to do with what's taking place right now. This article right here. Census data shows, let me pull this up. Census data shows widening diversity, number of white people falls for first time. Census data shows widening diversity, number of white people falls for first time. Okay. The report marks the first time the absolute number of people who identify as white also has shrunk since a census started being taken in 1790. The number of people identifying as non-Hispanic white and no other race dropped by 5.1 million people to 191.7 million people, a decrease of 2.6%. Okay. This is the first time the population of white people in this country dropped below 60%. It dropped down to 57%. Okay. It dropped from 63.7% in the 2010 census to 57.8% in the 2010 census, 63.7%. It dropped to 57.8% in the 2020 census. Okay. This right here is scaring a whole lot of people. This right here is scaring a whole lot of people. So now you're seeing, they knew these trends were coming, but now you're seeing the intensification of suppressing the votes of non-white people, especially African Americans. All right. Now, when we look at Reconstruction, so Reconstruction is 1865 to 1877. Reconstruction is going to end because of the Compromise of 1877, which was the result of the 1876 presidential election between Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican, and Samuel J. Tilden, the Democrat. All right. And Reconstruction ends, and it was a secret backdoor deal made between supporters of Rutherford B. Hayes and those of Samuel J. Tilden. Neither one had enough electoral college votes to become president. So the Republicans say, if you let Samuel J. Tilden become president, he'll remove the rest of the Union troops out of the South, and the Union troops were protecting the rights to a certain extent of African Americans, other former slaves. Democrats agree to this. Rutherford B. Hayes becomes president. He removes the rest of the Union troops. This allows the Southern segregationist Democrats to take back full control of state legislatures, etc., and to really impose the full impact of Jim Crow laws. All right. And we're going to see this stuff go downhill. And we're going to see the Mississippi State Convention of 1890, which is going to implement poll taxes and literacy tests in Mississippi to suppress the African American vote. And at this time in Mississippi in 1890, African Americans made up the majority of the population of Mississippi. We're going to see that it's called the Mississippi Plan. It's going to be adopted by other Southern states, South Carolina, Alabama, Louisiana. In South Carolina, the majority of the state legislature during Reconstruction were African Americans because we were electing them into office. We're going to see a reversal of this. During Reconstruction, we're going to elect about 2,000 African-American elected officials, largely in the South. We're going to see all this reversed. The attack on January 6th is a continuation of not just the Civil War, but the end of Reconstruction and what happened after Reconstruction. So when we go through and study this history, we're going to see an attack not just on African Americans' economic progress, but African Americans' political progress. And and what we're seeing right now is a continuation of that. This is an example of how elections have consequences. When we look at Reconstruction, 1865 to 1877, for a 14-year period, the U.S. government took steps to try and integrate the nation's newly freed African-American population into society. Between 1863 and 1877, the U.S. government undertook the task of integrating nearly 4 million formerly enslaved people into society after the Civil War bitterly divided the country over the issue of slavery. A white slave-holding South that had built its economy and culture on slave labor and now forced by its defeat in the Civil War. They claimed 620,000 lives. They're forced to change their economic, political, and social relations with African Americans. We talk about the Freedmen's Bureau, okay? The Bureau of Freedmen, the U.S. Bureau of Freedmen, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands, which is to a certain extent helping African Americans and poor, destitute white people. It's helping them negotiate labor contracts after the Civil War ends. It's helping them find lost loved ones, because we're trying to see, we valued family, we valued marriage. One of the things that the Freedmen's Bureau is doing is helping us find lost loved ones and place ads in newspapers, and it's helping us get married legally, because we had marriages on various plantations if it was allowed by the slave owners, but they weren't quote unquote legal marriages. So we're legally getting married. The Freedmen's Bureau is establishing schools and historically Black colleges and universities, things like this. Okay, then you have the Freedmen's Bank as well. All right, the Freedmen's Bank is going to collapse in basically 1874. $2.9 million in deposits that we had are going to be lost. All right, all this history takes place after slavery ends. So we have Reconstruction, we have Reconstruction ending, which is really going to set African Americans back. Let's continue here. So we talk about Special Field Order number 15, 40 acres and a mule. Everybody likes to talk about 40 acres and a mule. Very few people have actually like studied it, what it actually is. Okay, and those who just joined us, I'm doing a brief preview of a 10-week online course that I teach on Saturdays called From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Okay, we deal with history, this crucial period of history after the Civil War ends, and we look at how we got what happened to us after slavery ended. All right, and chattel slavery was not that long ago when it ends. With 13th Amendment, December 1865. Okay, it's not that long ago. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Scroll down the page. We have the information there for the course. Don't worry about the date, but scroll down. Click on register here. It takes you to the next page, and on the next page you could register for the class. Now we have bonus content. As soon as you register, you can like watch the class we did last week. Click on enroll on the next page. The class is regularly $130, is on sale $80. We do the classes live. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch them over and over again. We have a live text chat. You can ask questions in class. You can see me, I can't see you. So it's not like Zoom. You don't have to worry. You can be in your pajamas or what have you. You can see me, I can't see you. And then all the sessions are recorded. So even after this 10-week online course is over with, like next year, you can go back and you can watch the full 10 weeks. You can also use this with your children. I would say the content is PG-13. I'm not crazy. I don't do a lot of cursing, and it's not vulgar, things like that. Okay. So I would say it's PG-13. We just posted the link here. So you can register. You can join us in class today. Today class is going to start about 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Normally it's 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right. As a special bonus, you will get in digital download format when you register. You get the 2.5-hour lecture that I did dealing with the history of Juneteenth. I did that June 16th, 2021. It's a 2.5-hour lecture I did dealing with the history of Juneteenth. You'll get that also. And as a special bonus, there's a 6-title bundle pack that you'll also get. Black Migration 1619 to 2019. Black Migration 1619 to 2019. It includes 6 of my lectures. This is going to be in digital download format. You'll get that also as a special bonus. So this is like about a $200 value that you get for $80. And these are the titles. We also have it on our website if you want to order it separately. My 6 DVD, 6 lecture series, Black Migrations. Okay. And we deal with ancient African history. We deal with the Great Migration, 1915 and 1970. We deal with when Black men dominated horse racing and how we were dominating horse racing and winning the Kentucky Derbies and got pushed out of horse racing. This is Oliver Lewis right here. He won the first Kentucky Derby in 1975. He was 19 years old, African-American man. These are all winners of the Kentucky Derby. Jimmy Wingfield won the last. He was the last African-American to win the Kentucky Derby. He won in 1902. You get 6 principles of self-defense, the history of why we switched from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. You get all that in this bundle pack. But this is going to be a bonus that you get when you register for this online course also. Okay, this is a special bonus from me to you. All right, let's continue here. How's everybody doing? If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them. How you all like this type of information? Okay, we have Carl, Jervy, May, just a few of the people watching, Lindale. Okay, let's go back to this here. Okay, so special field order number 15. We go through and break down what that was. There's a lot of misconceptions about this. Okay, this does not apply to all former slaves. This only applied to coastal land in South Carolina, Florida, and Georgia. Coastal land in South Carolina, Florida, and Georgia. Most of this land is going to be taken back. You had about 400,000 acres of confiscated land, confiscated from Southerners and Southern plantation owners and slave owners. It's going to be divided up among 40,000 African-American families. Okay, most of that land is going to be taken back by President Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln. He was Lincoln's vice president. He was sympathetic to the South. Okay, sympathetic to the South and to the slave owners as well. These rumors rested on solid foundations. Abolitionists had discussed land redistribution at the beginning of the war. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln ordered 20,000 acres of land confiscated in South Carolina, sold to freedmen in 20-acre plots. Secretary of the Treasury Salmon Chase expanded the offering to 40 acres per family, and it's going to end up going to about 40,000 African-American families. What's interesting when you research this, and we take you through Special Field Order number 15, what's interesting is that land that we got in those 3 states, it was only supposed to be inhabited by African-Americans, that land, and we were supposed to govern ourselves. It was designed to be really a nation within a nation. When you actually read Special Field Order number 15, okay, when you actually read it, contrary to popular belief, it was not designed, because a lot of people who advocate for reparations say, oh, they promised us 40 acres and a mule, etc. The land, first of all, the mule came later, and the mule was supposed to be loaned to us. It wasn't going to be given to us. It's supposed to be loaned. 1. 2, the land was not compensation for work that we did previously as slaves. Our ancestors did, not us, but our ancestors. We weren't there. All the former slaves died in the 1950s. Okay, this is one of the challenges with actually getting reparations, because a lot of the strategies we're using ain't gonna get us anything except, well, a lot of the strategies that we're using, 1, are not legal strategies. 2, is not going to bring about comprehensive reparations, which means repairing the damage of slavery and the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, etc. When we go through this class, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked with that. General William Tecumseh Sherman, General William T. Sherman, January 16th, 1865, issued Special Field Order number 15, which redistributed roughly 400,000 acres of confiscated land in Low Country, Georgia, and South Carolina, but it's also Florida as well. When the Freedmen's Bureau was established in March 1865, created partly to redistribute confiscated land from Southern whites, it gave legal title for 40-acre plots to African Americans and white Southern Unionists. Okay, so this land is largely going to be taken back by Andrew Johnson. After the war was over, President Andrew Johnson returned most of the land to the former white slave owners. At its peak during Reconstruction, the Freedmen's Bureau had 900 agents scattered across 11 southern states, handling everything from labor disputes to distributing clothing and food to starting schools to protecting freedmen from the Ku Klux Klan. I would argue, when we go study this history, I would argue African, we have never really recovered from the collapse of the Freedmen's Bureau, the collapse of the Freedmen's Bank, but then also you tie to this the Kerner Commission report from March 1868. I'm sorry, March 1968, wrong century. Kerner Commission report from March 1968, because this is something we talk about in the class. When you go study the Kerner Commission report, and the Kerner Commission report was commissioned by President Lyndon Johnson in 1967. It was like June, July 1967, to study the rebellions, or what white people call riots, the rebellions that were taking place in this country from 1964 to 1967, the rebellions that African Americans are having all across this country. When you go study the recommendations, when you go study what this commission came up with, they talked about the role that white supremacy and racism played. They talked about the role that oppression of African Americans, being locked out of job opportunities, poor housing, poor funding for schools. All this took place, and they made recommendations. Check this out. The recommendations that they made were largely ignored by President Johnson. Their recommendations were on point. When you go study what they said, it sounds similar to reparations. Okay. Now, they weren't saying just give everybody a check and everything's going to be all right. That's one of the problems. That's one of the problems with people who think that repairing the damage of slavery just means a check. You're not addressing the structural inequities and the laws and policies put in place that maldistributed wealth, power, and resources into the hands of white people, into the hands of Europeans. If you think repairing the damage of slavery means just giving a check, that means you haven't done a systems analysis of the damage that was done by slavery and the legacy of slavery. One. Two, you're under the misconception that just by giving a check that somehow that's going to level the playing field. No, it's not, because the laws and policies will still be in place. And they're still inflicting damage today. They are a legacy of slavery, and you haven't repaired that. I'm not against cash payments, but cash payments can be one part of a comprehensive reparations package. But just cash payments alone is not going to repair the damage. And I guarantee you, whatever amount that we get, if we get $500,000, $1 million, whatever amount we get, white people have it all back by this time next week. And you will not have repaired the damage, and you haven't done anything about the laws and policies that are still in place, that are still inflicting harm upon us. One of the things that is important for people to do is look at the study from Citigroup Bank. Okay. Look at the study from Citigroup Bank. Now, I'm gonna pull this up, but this deals with how racism has cost the U.S. economy at least $16 trillion over a 20-year period of time, from 2000 to 2020, basically. Just that 20-year period of time, racism, and they talk about laws and policies, has cost the U.S. economy $16 trillion. Okay. Before we go to that, let me just hit this dealing with the Kerner Commission right quick. President Johnson was distracted from really dealing with the results of the Kerner Commission. Okay. Some of the results he disagreed with, but he was preoccupied with the Vietnam War. He was preoccupied with the Vietnam War. There's an interview, a 26-minute interview that NBC News did with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in March of 1967. Okay, March or May, I think it was May 1967. It was 11 months before he was assassinated. Okay. I played this interview on my radio show a number of times, the African History Network show. One of the things he talks about in this interview is how the Vietnam War has taken up a lot of media attention and a lot of Americans' attention away from the civil rights movement. And he said it makes it harder for us to get our issues addressed. Johnson was President Lyndon Johnson, not Andrew Johnson. President Lyndon Johnson, Lyndon Baines Johnson, was preoccupied with the Vietnam War, and that was taking a lot of attention away from the civil rights movement and the plight of African Americans. So the Kerner Commission report gets pushed on the back burner. In this interview, is before the Kerner Commission report comes out. Dr. King, and I'll give you the name of it. I think it's called From Civil Rights to Black Power, something like that. I forgot the exact name of it. Let me pull this up here. Give me a second. This is from like civil rights to Black Power, but I'll pull it up. But Dr. King talks about how at the newspapers back at that time, on the front page of the newspapers every day is information, stories about the Vietnam War, and information dealing with the civil rights movement gets pushed back on page 16 or something like that. Okay. And he talks about how it's harder to get our issues dealt with and to push our agenda, etc. So, and some of that talk is taking place right now when we deal with the end of the Afghanistan war, the 20-year Afghanistan war. And like $2.2 trillion at least have been spent over 20 years. And you got a lot of African Americans saying, well, wait a second, that's some, maybe not all of that money, but a portion of that money could have gone to not just paying reparations, or even if you don't want to call it reparations, restitution, but investing in communities where we live, okay, to rebuild those communities, okay? This is the talk that's taking place right now. They're saying, wait a second, you spent all that money in Afghanistan, okay? That money could have gone to help right here in this country. Let me see here. That was okay. Oh, you see some of these same conversations taking place, but we have to draw the connection between them and not make the same mistakes. All right, let me try to pull up it was 1967. Here's the clip from NBC News. We'll post this clip. Name of it is called 11 months before his assassination, Martin Luther King talks new phase of civil rights struggle. He talks about the Black Power movement. Okay. This is from NBC News. They have the full interview here. Watch that. I played it a number of times on my show. It's deep. Okay. This right here from NBC News. It was a 26-minute interview they did in 1967 at Ebenezer Baptist Church. All right. NBC News reporter Sandy Vanacker spoke with Dr. King about the new phase of the civil rights movement. All right, let's continue here. So all this history is connected. All right. And you know, it's African history and culture that gives us our foundation. This gives us our values, our interests, and our principles. This gives us a cultural paradigm that we see reality through. And it's our history and culture that also influences our economic empowerment and political empowerment as well. All this is connected. Okay. So if you like this type of information, you can register for this 10-week online course that I teach on Saturdays. Normally it's 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today we're going to start a little later. And this is from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Okay. And we deal with this history after the Civil War ended. You're going to get some bonus content. You're going to get some extras as well, some bonus lectures from me also, one dealing with the history of Juneteenth, and then a 6 title bundle pack, Black Migration 1619 to 2019. We just posted a link here, but you can also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Scroll down the homepage, click on register here, and it takes you to the next page, and just click on enroll. Class is regularly $130, on sale $80. As soon as you register, you can start watching the content. You can join us in class, in today's class also. Okay, click right here on enroll, and this information is going to blow you away. Let's see. Lastly, okay. Let's see. All right. So we deal with Juneteenth. All right. And why the emancipation did not free the enslaved Africans. We deal with Juneteenth and what that really was, and misunderstandings about Juneteenth also. I'm for celebrating Juneteenth and commemorating Juneteenth, but we have to get the history correct. And we have to deal with the history of slavery, the history of the Civil War, the history of Juneteenth as well. June 19th, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger delivers General Order Number 3 in Galveston, Texas. But that was not the end of slavery in this country, because you're going to have some slave owners in Texas who keep that information away from their slaves, okay, and keep them enslaved, okay. So there's a debate over, did all the slave owners there's a debate over, did the slave owners know that the slaves were freed? Okay, yeah, they probably did. They just kept them. They just kept the information away from many of the slaves, and kept them in bondage until the following year. All right, and then we also have to understand that Texas was more far removed from battles during the Civil War, so you had slave owners who would flee from surrounding southern states and flee into Texas with their slaves, okay, to escape from a lot of the battles in the Civil War as well. All right. The other thing that's important to understand, and we look at what's taking place in Texas right now, okay, the voter suppression bill, the attacks on what can be taught in school, dealing with the history of slavery, etc. Well, understanding history of Texas, and Texas coming into the Union in 1845 as a slaveholding state, I can see why a lot of these white Republicans in Texas don't want the truth taught. I can see why when you study the history of Texas, okay, and Texas was Mexican territory, all right, and the U.S. wanted that territory because, see, this gets into a whole of Europeans want to take over the entire North American continent and manifest destiny in 1845, and many Europeans thinking that, you know, it's their God-given right really to take over the North American continent. All right, they already took over land from Native Americans and indigenous and African people who were already here, because African people, we've been in this land at least 51,700 years. When you read The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep, who I've interviewed a number of times, and he speaks to my online classes sometimes. Dr. David Imhotep breaks down this information in The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. All right, so and we deal with that a lot in the other class that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, where they didn't teach you in school. I deal with a lot of that information in that class. In that class, as I said, that deals with ancient African history through slavery. All right, and from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement, 1865 to 1968. This 10-week course picks up basically where the first one leaves off. Now, you can take the classes in any order, that's fine, and you still have access to the content even after the class is over with. But this is a deep, deep history, okay? If we understand that, yes, the transatlantic slave trade happened, but African people were here for tens of thousands of years before the transatlantic slave trade happened. We were here in this land, okay? There's a presence, not just from the Khoisan, come from Southern Africa, the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. It's also an ancient Egyptian, ancient Kemetic presence here as well. And if we understood that we did not first come to this land in 1619 as the 1619 project, even though there's some good things in the 1619 project, there's some problems with it also. Okay. And I know they do talk about the fact that the Spanish were taking Africans into Georgia and South Carolina in 1526, enslaving them. That's 93 years before 1619. That's true, but this was our land stolen from us. This was our land stolen from us. This is something the 1619 project does not deal with. If we understood this, it would cause overnight, it would cause a paradigm shift with African people, with African Americans. It would cause a total paradigm shift with us. Because a lot of our understanding of history in this country deals with the oppression of African people and dehumanization of African people. It will cause a total paradigm shift. We were here before Native Americans came into existence. The people who are called Native Americans, we were here before they came into existence. Okay. So this is a deep, deep history. Your thoughts create feelings. Your feelings create actions and behaviors. Your actions and behaviors create results. This is why I don't call our people the N-word. This is why I don't call our women B's and H's and thoughts and all different types of dehumanizing pejorative terms. Because I understand what happens when you put negative labels on people. You relabel people. Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about this in post-traumatic slave syndrome. You relabel people with negative pejorative terms to then justify their mistreatment. This is what we see taking place in slavery, which largely happens after the Moors lose control. And that's really, to tell you the truth, the transatlantic slave trade is really a continuation of the fight and the wars between the African Moors and Europeans in Europe. Because Europeans already knew about African people. See, the way that is taught, and when I was taking Africana studies classes 30 years ago, or 25 years ago, whatever it was, at Wayne State University, they started the classes in mid 15th century. Okay. Now I was already studying Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark and Dr. Naeem Akbar. I was already studying that, Dr. Wade Nobles, things like this. They start in the mid 15th century. They skip over the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. That's why this book is so crucial. Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivor Van Sertima. That's why this book is so crucial. They skip over all that, and they're going to deal with slavery starting with the Portuguese, like 1441. Okay, 1441, 1444. The Europeans had been dealing with Africans for hundreds of years, just dealing with the Moors. Africans were already in Europe before then, but just dealing with the Moors. They had already been dealing with African people. They knew who they were. That wasn't the first time they came in contact. They knew what time it was. They knew what was going on. Then this book right here by Runoko Rashidi, and Runoko just passed away August 2nd, 2021. He was doing a tour of Egypt and passed away from a heart attack. Black Star, the African Presence in Early Europe. Okay, we use these. I use these. These are two of the books I use in the first class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. You can register for that class, that 10-week online course at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com also. But see, this is a deep, deep history. When we learned that this was our land stolen from us, we've been here for tens of thousands of years in this land that we call the United States of America. Okay, that will cause a total paradigm shift. One, you're going to have to rewrite a lot of these history books, but that'll cause a total paradigm shift. Okay. And because the way we're taught that we first came to this land, conquered and shackled and changed by Europeans. If that's your premise, you're already far behind. If that's your premise, there's a saying, I don't know who said it, but if you think that if the majority of what you know about your history is slavery, then anything after you do after slavery will look like progress. If that's your starting point, okay, that can't be our starting point. It's not historically accurate. That can't be our starting point. All right. Okay. So Dennis said this will not get us reparations. What do you mean, Dennis? And what will get us reparations? Because people don't even understand. Reparations is a legal argument. When you go to elected officials, when you go to members of the House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, based upon Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the U.S. Constitution, Congress controls the power of the purse. So reparations has to pass both the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate and be signed into law by a president. Okay, 1. 2, when you go to talk about repairing the damage of slavery, reparations, you go and make legal arguments. When you go to elected officials write laws. Lawmakers write laws. They don't legislate morality. So you don't go talking about morality. We were enslaved. We didn't get paid, all this stuff. We know it was wrong, but it was legal. You go and make legal arguments. The foundational law of this country is the U.S. Constitution. So you don't go talking to lawmakers about morality. If you want to argue morality, go to church. You go and make legal arguments. One of the strongest legal arguments, yes, the Black Freedmen Indian treaties of 1866. That's true. Those are treaties. They should be enforced. They're still on the books. Many of our ancestors got land, like Sarah Rector, and I talk about Sarah Rector in the class. Okay, let me wrap up with this here. But I talk about Sarah Rector in the class. And one of the reasons why I talk about Sarah Rector is this ties directly into this ties directly into Black Wall Street, but this ties directly into the treaties. Okay, and the Dawes Allotment Act. We're going to talk about the Dawes Allotment Act in class today. We're going to talk about the Exodus of 1879, African Americans going into Kansas, the Exodus. And we'll talk about the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887. They redistributed 138 million acres of land. It was supposed to go to Native Americans and Black Indians. 2/3 of it went to white people. But how many of you are familiar with Sarah Rector? This ties into the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866 and the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887. The Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians all own African slaves. How many of y'all knew this? They all own African slaves. Europeans called them the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans because they adopted the way of the white man. They learned English. They became Christians. They learned to farm. They became farmers, things like this. When the Civil War happens, and I got to wrap up with this here. Also, I want to talk about Zara Cully for just a second. When the Civil War happens, they fight on behalf of the Civil War. Okay, the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans, they all fight on behalf of the they all fight on behalf of the South. They all fight on behalf of the South. Okay. When they fight on behalf of the South, they don't know that violated treaties that they had with the U.S. government. Okay. Prior to the Civil War, they're going to be on Indian territory. They're going to have Indian territory, like the this ties into the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Okay, I'm making this too long. I'm about to really teach a class now. This ties into the Indian Removal Act of 1830 and the signed by President Andrew Jackson in 1830 that pushed the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans off their land in southeastern United States, Alabama, Georgia, things like this. They go over 1,000 miles on what's known as the Trail of Tears. And they go into Oklahoma and they take their African slaves with them. 1/3 of the people who were on the Trail of Tears were African people, enslaved Africans, okay? Owned by the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans. Now, some people make the argument, well, some of them weren't slaves, they were really servants, whatever. Okay, whatever you want to call them. How, whatever makes you sleep better at night. All right, whatever. So when the Civil War ends, they have to give up their slaves, and they're making arguments, oh, we're sovereign nations. We don't have to abide by your laws, things like this. So they enter into these treaties once again with the U.S. government. and they have to give land to these former slaves. They get compensation, they get cash payments, all types of things like this, and they get membership in these Native American nations. Okay, and they get basically largely put into like a protective class, so to speak. This is something Dr. Claude Anderson, one of my teachers, Dr. Claude Anderson, talks about. But this ties into the history of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Black Wall Street. Why? Well, number one, Tulsa, Oklahoma was founded around 1836 by Creek Indians, right around 1836, 1834, by Creek Indians who get pushed off their land in southeastern United States because of the Indian Removal Act. Now, Sarah Rector, who was known as the richest Afro-American girl in the world, in the country, Sarah Rector, her family her parents had been enslaved by Creek Indians. So they had that ancestry. She's in Oklahoma. She's born on Creek Indian land. She's going to get, her and her family are going to get land because of the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887, which this is something we're going to talk about in the class today. Okay. And she's going to get 100 and, she gets acres of land. They receive like 160 acres of land because of the Dawes Allotment Act. Oil is going to be discovered on her land. And she's going to become a millionaire. Sarah Rector. Face2faceafrica.com has an article. We've talked about this before in my lecture series, Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. I talk about Sarah Rector. She's one of the people I talk about. She became a millionaire in 1913 at the age of 12. Okay? This ties deep into this history. Oklahoma, when we just had the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre, June 1st, 1921. All this history is connected. And they talked about how a lot of the early African-American landowners in Tulsa, Oklahoma got land because of the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866 and the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887. All this history is connected. When we look at this here quickly, because I want to talk about Zara Cully in just a minute. How many people know who Zara Cully is? She was born, Sarah Rector, born in Indian Territory, March 3rd, 1902. Okay. Her parents were owned by Creek Indians before the Civil War. And as the site U.S. Slave explains, she and some 600 other Black children were entitled to land allotments as the children of enslaved people belonging to the Creek Indian Nation. Now, this is one of the reasons why Oklahoma had about 50 African-American townships. Okay, we had about 50 Black townships in Oklahoma because a lot of those African-Americans got land because of these treaties and the Dawes Allotment Act. And we rebuilt Black Wall Street after the race riot, after the Tulsa Race Massacre. We rebuilt Black Wall Street with our own dollars, and we got help from surrounding Black townships. We didn't get government help to rebuild. In 1886, the Creek Nation signed a treaty with the United States government promising to emancipate their 16,000 African slaves and incorporate them into their nation as citizens entitled to, quote, equal interest in the soil and national funds, end quote. 2 decades later, the federally imposed Dawes Allotment Act of 1887 sparked the beginning of the total assimilation of the Indians of the so-called 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans by forcing them to live on individually owned lots and land instead of communally as they had done for centuries. Okay, so oil is going to be discovered on her land. The BB Jones, the independent oil driller BB Jones, found a gusher on her land, and this gusher is generating money, she began receiving an income of $300 per day. And she became a millionaire in 1913, Sarah Rector. Okay? All this history is connected. And she was, and back in 1913, they call her Afro-American, because the term Afro-American dates back to the 1830s. I know a lot of people think the term Afro-American started in 1960s. No, it means you haven't studied history. That dates back to the 1830s. And you had the Afro-American newspaper founded around 1882 in Baltimore. You had the Afro-American League founded in about 1898 by Bishop Alexander Walters and T. Thomas Fortune. Okay, the Afro-American League. And the Afro-American League, that organization, you had Booker T. Washington in that organization. You also had Dr. W.B. Du Bois, the National Afro-American League, okay? And out of that organization, Dr. W.B. Du Bois is going to leave and form the Niagara Movement about 1905. Okay, National Afro-American League, 1887, 1898. Okay, read this piece here from blackpast.org, dealing with the National Afro-American League. They were called Afro-American. The term African-American, contrary to popular belief, Jesse Jackson did not create the term African-American. I don't know why people keep saying that nonsense. The term African-American, the earliest recorded usage goes back to May 15, 1782 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The term African-American. Look, March 29th, 1964, in the Battle of the Bullet, Malcolm X used the term African-American. So how the hell did Jesse Jackson create it in 1988, 1989? Malcolm X used the term African-American March 29th, 1964, in the Battle of the Bullet in Washington Heights, New York. Read this article here. Okay. This is from the New York Times. The term African-American appears earlier than thought. This is from April 21st, 2015. It appears in a book of sermons, 2 sermons written by the African-American, one on the capture of Lord Cornwallis to be sold. Okay. We'll read this right here. That dates back to May 15, 1782, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's the earliest recorded usage of the term African-American. But we were calling ourselves African-Americans in the 1960s. Malcolm X did that. Okay, in the Battle of the Bullet. And if you read the Battle of the Bullet, even from April 3rd, because he delivered it 3 times that I know of, March 29th, 1964. This was 3 days after he met Dr. King. We're going to break all this stuff down in the class when we get to that, those lessons in the class when we deal with the 60s. March 26, 1964, Malcolm X meets Dr. King for the first and only time at the U.S. Senate debate for the Civil Rights Movement. The U.S. Senate debate for the Civil Rights Movement, okay? For the Civil Rights Act, I should say. U.S. Senate debate for the Civil Rights Act. So all those pictures that you see of Dr. King and Malcolm X together, that's when that picture is from, okay? March 26, 1964. I like the TV show Godfather of Harlem, but their timeline of stuff is wrong. Their timeline of stuff. I mean, they're showing Malcolm X with a goatee during the Battle of the Bullet speech. Malcolm did the Battle of the Bullet before he went to Mecca. He starts wearing a goatee and facial hair while he's on his Hajj in Mecca, and then he wears it when he comes back. He was clean shaven when he delivered the Battle of the Bullet. The timeline of certain things is I like the show, but their timeline is off on some of this stuff. But anyway, and also they didn't show where he meets Dr. King. I don't think they show where he meets Dr. King, which is really important to talk about. March 26, 1964. Now, there was the movie that came out about 1978, made for TV, called King, starring Paul Winfield as Dr. King, and starring as Coretta Scott King, it was Cicely Tyson. That movie shows a fictitious sit-down meeting between Dr. King and Malcolm X. One, we know it's fictitious because they ain't have a meeting that long, a sit-down meeting. They only met for a couple minutes here. This was the only time they met. Two, now they were trying to meet before Malcolm was assassinated. Okay. And Malcolm meets with Coretta Scott King one time in Alabama. And Dr. King is in jail. But they're trying to set up another meeting between them. If you watch the movie, the documentary, Make It Plain. Make It Plain is probably the best documentary dealing with Malcolm X so far. Okay, I know his daughters are putting out something. Maybe that'll be better. But so far, I've seen most of the documentaries on Malcolm. Make It Plain is probably the best so far on Malcolm. And Make It Plain has Dr. John Henrik Clarke in the documentary. Dr. John Henrik Clarke was good friends with Malcolm X. They talk about when Malcolm officially separates from the Nation of Islam, March 8th, 1964. There's a meeting that takes place at Juanita Portier's house. Juanita Portier. Okay. Malcolm X is there. Different members of the civil rights movement, different leaders of the civil rights movement are there. They can't, if they weren't there, they sent a surrogate. They had the meeting for them to put all their differences on the table so they can work together. Because when you actually go read in this book here, and I got to wrap things up. This book here, Malcolm X Speaks, is really important because this deals with, this has the Ballad of the Bullet from April 3rd, 1964. He delivered April 3rd, 1964 in Cleveland, Ohio, April 4th, 1964 in Detroit, Michigan at King Solomon Baptist Church, and then March 29th, 1964 in Washington Heights, New York. Okay, the Ballad of the Bullet. One of the themes of the Ballad of the Bullet is Malcolm is talking about injecting Black nationalism into the civil rights movement. Malcolm joins the civil rights movement when he officially separates from the Nation of Islam. This is something that people really don't talk about. And the ideologies of Malcolm X and Dr. King are converging. Okay, this is why this book here from James H. Cone is so important. Okay, Martin, Malcolm in America, Dream or Nightmare, which shows how toward the end of both of their lives, their ideologies are converging and they're sounding like each other. This is why it's important to read Dr. King's books. Where do we go from here is his last book. Came out, he wrote in 1967. And I've got it here. This is Dr. King's first book, Stride Toward Freedom, which is about the Montgomery bus boycott. This came out in 1958. Okay, Stride Toward Freedom. And it was remember 1958, that's when Dr. King was stabbed in the chest with a letter opener by Azola Ware Curry, this crazed, deranged African-American woman. He was doing a book signing for this book when he was stabbed in the chest with a letter opener and almost died. So, because Dr. King wrote books, okay? A lot of people act like Dr. King ain't write books. A lot of people act like the only thing he did was deliver the I Have a Dream speech, August 28th, 1963, and that wasn't even the name of the speech. It was originally called Normalcy Never Again. Then it was called A Canceled Check. Yeah, like he did that and marched and then delivered I've Been to the Mountaintop. Where the hell is I don't know what my other book is. I can't find it now. Where do we go from here? But anyway, that's probably his best book. That's a crucial book. Now, that was Dr. King's last book. But anyway, Um, when you read the Battle of the Bullet, and they have it online also, you can Google it. It's in this book also, I think. This deals with Malcolm X's final speeches. Uh, February 1965, the final speeches. They had one from like January, but this is with his final speeches also. Okay. But one of the themes of the Battle of the Bullet is Malcolm X is talking about joining the civil rights movement and injecting black nationalism into the civil rights movement. Another thing he talks about is voting strategically and registering his independence. Okay. He talks about this also in the speech. Let me see if we can pull this up here quickly. So, is that the right one? No, that's not it. That's not the one I want. Hold on, let me see. I pulled this up before. Let's look at this. But lastly, let's see here. Battle of the Bullet. I think this is it. No, it's not. Hold on, let me try to pull this up here. So you can register for this 10-week online course. There's so much that we cover. I'm going to post a link again. It's also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Right on the home page, click on, you scroll down the home page, we have the information for the online course. We do the class live. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. Even after the course is over with, like next year, you still have access to the full class. You can still watch it. Okay, just click on register here. Takes you to our next page. We usually do this class on Saturdays, normally 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today, we're going to do it a little later. And when you click on register here, it takes you to the next page. Just click on enroll. Click on enroll. Course is regularly $130, on sale $80. This bonus content you can watch. You can watch the class we did last week also. And you get some bonus lectures from me as well in digital download format. Let me see. I think this is it right here. Okay. That's not searchable. Where is that? Let's see. I can't. I'm trying to find it here. But also, I want to talk about Zara Cully for a quick minute here. How many people know who Zara Cully is? Zara Cully was Mother Jefferson on the Jeffersons. Okay, Zara Cully. She was a veteran actress. This is a picture of Zara Cully back in the day. You wouldn't recognize her because we're so used to seeing her like as Mother Jefferson. This is a picture of Zara Cully back in the day. Okay, but she played Mother Jefferson on the Jeffersons, and she passed away in, I think it was 1978. Here's what's so interesting about Zara Cully, and let me try to pull this up from blackdn.com has information on Zara Cully. Hold on, let's pull this up here. So we've all seen the Jeffersons. We've all seen Zara Cully. Did you know that? Did you know that Zara Cully was born in 1892? Mother Jefferson from the Jeffersons. Okay. Did you know she was born in 1892? Did you know that Zara Cully was born 3 years before Frederick Douglass died? Frederick Douglass dies in 1895. Zara Cully was born 27 years after the Civil War ended, 27 years after slavery ended. She was born 3 years before Frederick Douglass died. Okay. She dies in 1978, if I remember correctly. I talked about this on my radio show. This shows you how, like, people think slavery is ancient history. No, it's not. She was born. Frederick Douglass was a former slave. Zara Cully was born before Frederick Douglass died, and Harriet Tubman dies in 1913. She's born before Harriet Tubman dies. Booker T. Washington dies in 1915. She dies she's born before Booker T. Washington dies. This piece here from blackden.com is also an article on Zara Cully as well. So when we watch the Jeffersons and we see Zara Cully, you're looking at a woman that was born 3 years before Frederick Douglass died. Okay, this piece right here from blackden.com talks about Zara Cully. And there's also there's information, you can Google her. Okay. But this shows you this history is not ancient history, and we're still dealing with the after effects of the end of the Civil War, the end of slavery, the end of Reconstruction. All right. We're still dealing with the after effects of that, Jim Crow, segregation, all of that. 3 years. Let me post this right here. Okay. Right. So she was born 3 years before Frederick Douglass died. And let me fix that. Misspelled Frederick Douglass' name. Okay, there we go. So this shows you this is not ancient history. A lot of people want to think it's ancient history, but it's not. Okay, let me see something here. Just 1 second. I'm trying to find something here. Okay. So we'll post a link again. You can register for this 10-week online course from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. This is here. I'm looking at this from the Battle of the Bullet. And it was also a good speech to read. Malcolm's is his By Any Means Necessary speech. But that is from June 28th, 1964. Because he deals with the formation of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. He's announcing the formation of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. Let's see here. Just a second, let me pull it. That's June 28th, 1964. And they have the full speech at blackpast.org. foundation of formation of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And in this speech here, let me see here. In this speech here, he talks about a voter registration program to register people as register African Americans as independent voters. The Organization of Afro-American Unity will organize the Afro-American community block by block to make the community aware of its power and its potential. We will start immediately a voter registration drive to make every unregistered voter in the Afro-American community an independent voter. Okay. He said, we won't organize any black man to be a Democrat or a Republican because both of them have sold us out. Both of them have sold us out. Both parties have sold us out. Both parties are racist, and the Democratic Party is more racist than the Republican Party. Now, keep in mind, this is 64. The party realignment is not complete. Many of the Southern segregationists, Democrats, lead the Democratic Party, and where do they go? They go to the Republican Party. This is before the party realignment is taking place, which dates back to 1928 and the Lily White movement in 1928, but it's not complete yet. When he says this, a lot of those Southern segregationists, Democrats like Strom Thurmond, they're going to leave the Republican Party and they're going to leave the Democratic Party and they go to the Republican Party. So you're going to have a flip. It wasn't just African Americans who were leaving one party and go to the other. It's white people that were doing it also. Okay, so read the rest of this as well. But this is June 28th, 1964. And he talks about he talks about the importance of politics and registering to vote and registering as an independent. Now, you can be Democrat, Republican, what have you. Okay, it's about the policies, not so much about the party, the political party. It's about the policies of the party. Okay, because there's some Democrats need to be voted out of office. A lot more Republicans need to be voted out of office, but there's some Democrats need to be voted out of office because of their policies. Okay, they need to be replaced by other people who are more progressive, who have better policies, who advocate for better policies that are more beneficial to African Americans. So it's not about a D or an R. It's about the policies of the people, of the elected officials. Okay, so check that out. That is at blackpass.org. 1964, Malcolm X's speech at the founding rally of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. That was June 28th, 1964. Okay, that's at blackpass.org. All right. Yeah, Joe Manchin's ass need to be voted out of office. Now, the problem is Joe Manchin's not up for re-election in the 2022 midterm election. Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Now, see, West Virginia is really a red state. Donald Trump won West Virginia by about 40 points in 2016 and 2020. Joe Manchin is a conservative Democrat because liberal is not synonymous with Democrat. You can be a conservative Democrat. You can be a moderate Republican. You can be a liberal independent. Liberal is not synonymous with being a Democrat. All right. Being a conservative is not synonymous with being a Republican. So these are things that we have to understand as well. All right. Okay, look, we have to get out of here. Be sure to register for this 10-week online course from the Civil War. How do you all like this type of information? Number one, let me ask you that. How you all like this type of information? Did you learn anything today? If you learned something today, you like this type of information, the actual 10-week online course is going to blow you away. We do this online at our online school. So visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on the link here. This class here, we do basically 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturdays. Today, we're going to start later. And all the sessions are archived. You can go back and watch them over and over again. We just posted a link here and you register for that. And you can register also for the other 10-week online course I teach. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. All right, look, we have to get out of here. And if you want to support the African History Network beyond registering for the course, you can do so through Cash App and PayPal. PayPal, Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App. And through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. And this helps support the radio show. We're on 6 days a week. And just so people know, I don't get paid to do, I do radio 6 days a week. I don't get paid to do radio, but all this helps support the African History Network, helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting. This is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN show, SHOW. And these other ones are fake African History Network Cash App accounts. When you go to ours, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. Our Cash App tag is $ the AHN show, SHOW. So if you type it in, be sure you type in the full tag and it'll take you to our Cash App account. And then also you can support us through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show, SHOW, paypal.me/the AHN show. All right. Look, I have to get out of here. I have to teach this class. You can join us. You can register. We'll post a link here. You can register here right now and join us in class, and then also watch the bonus content. Remember, right now is correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Thanks for tuning in today. Hopefully you learned something. We focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now is correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time.